Now, with us still in the midst of the lockdown in the UK here and not being able to get out and shoot landscapes, I thought it was about time I put together some old footage from last year, last October, and believe it or not, last March, when I went out to compare two possibly usable landscape films. Now, these are 400 speed colour negative. It's the ubiquitous Portra 400 from Kodak and also Fuji's 400H, which is a lesser known film. Anyway, I went out deciding to see how they compared side by side in my Bronica over a couple of trips. Now, I've never put the video together. I would have liked to have done another trip, but that's looking increasingly unlikely. Time is short and I thought I'd get this out anyway. So let's start by looking at my trip and see through these 6 comparisons how the films stand up to each other. Now, this was the first scene. This is the Lake District in northern England. Beautiful day, blue skies, and in this scene I have a nice mix of greens and of oranges and the sort of autumnal colours. Set up the Bronica with the standard 18mm lens and focused in on the wall. A very simple composition, really for test purposes only, but I want to see how well it handles shadow detail, and in particular I've got a mix there of subtle greens and I've got the dead bracken, the dying bracken. So side by side, the Portra 400 and 400H. 400H is cooler, definitely cooler. The greens though are a bit more defined to my eye, they're less yellow. And also I'm finding that I like the sort of dead bracken a bit more. And in this close-up, hopefully you can see that the greens are more green and there is more separation within those green tones. And the orange is in there as well. Now we moved on to a small flowing river, a bit more dynamic this time. Again, a similar mix, as you can see in the background there, of the greens and of the oranges, the sort of dead leaves that have fallen. I set my Bronica up this time with my widest lens of 40mm, and I also used on this occasion a polarizer to take some of the glare off the water. But a similar sort of set of conditions. I've got those lovely greens in there, as you can see, with that moss. And again, a similar sort of result. We have the slightly cooler 400H Fuji, but it has those more vibrant greens for me. And also, looking close up, you can really see the difference in those leaves on the forest floor. They're much more orange and vibrant in the Fuji shot. Now, I moved on about a quarter of a mile down the river and I came across this simple scene here. And what I liked about it was obviously those leaves on the tree. Predominantly green around the area, but I used my polarizer again on my 80mm lens. And I set it up easy, just focusing on those leaves. I'm not too worried about maximum depth of field here. It's not about the composition, which is actually not very good, to be honest. But I particularly like the blend of colours, and also I had blue in here for the sky and on the water. Now, these are very close. The Fuji 400H has got a little bit more depth to it for my eye, and I'm noticing that there is a bit more shadow detail on the 400H shots. Now, that could be due to the timing, could be slightly different times, you know, but it's very, very close again. So for this next one, I decided to go all macro, and I put my standard lens on, which has a very close focus for a medium format camera, and I got really close in on some sort of leaves and a bit of fungi, because again, there's that nice balance of colours in there. You've got the greens and you've got a vibrant orange fungi in there. So I'd be interested to see how they separate it out. Now, these are again very close, as you can see. The 400H is a little bit warmer in terms of the fungi. The greens are also, to my eye, slightly more natural and a bit more separated, but it's so close. It could just come down, to be honest, to my scanning technique. Now in this one, we were driving along the road and I saw this lovely tree, lots of fallen leaves around it. And what drew me to it was plenty of good shadow detail and also the greens you can see on the bark there. So for a change, I loaded up with my longest lens, which is a 250mm. And I really cropped in. I got a much tighter crop on this one to really accentuate those areas I was going for. Now hopefully on this one you can see that it's again very close, but there is that warmth to the bracken on the Fuji 400H. Not quite so much on the Portra 400, surprisingly. But close up, look at the real difference there. Look at the green in the shadows on the Fuji shot. They are much more vibrant. And again, I'm thinking better shadow detail. So yeah, it's becoming a bit of a common theme, this. Now this last one, this was taken back in March last year, so months and months before the first shots. Lovely morning. I did have problems with the camera though, I'm not going to lie, and this is the only one that really came out well. So I set up with a short lens and a teleconverter, and I shot this distant tree with a blue background, And as you can see again, very similar. Now the clouds have moved on a bit with the Fuji shot, so yeah, about a minute between them. But again, very similar. I would say, however, that the sky on the Portra is more cyan. It's a bit more natural blue on the Fuji, but the sun had come out, as you can see on the first one, and it dipped slightly on the second, so that's a tricky comparison, that one. So anyway, when you see the films side by side, you may think to yourself, okay, I can see subtle differences in there. But look at this example here where I've actually tried to make the images the same. Now what I've done is I've tweaked Portra 400 to make it look like the Fuji 400H. Now to do this I had to mess about with some of the different colour channels. Primarily the blue, believe it or not, and also some of the orange. Now the blue in the water and the sky needed a bit of cranking up in the Portra shot to match the one in the Fuji. And also the oranges. It's a little bit more insipid with Portra. Funnily enough, you always think of Kodak as being the warm colours. But it wasn't much of a job, even with my very, very basic Lightroom skills, to make them look almost identical. Now they do to my eye look almost identical. And given a bit more time, I'm sure you could build a profile that made one look like the other. So it's not really a big issue which one you tend to shoot with. Now there are some advantages to using the likes of Portra 400 in that it's available in all formats right up to, I believe, I think it's about 11 by 14 inches. So huge choice of film sizes. Whereas 400H I believe now is not available in sheet film, so it's limited to medium format 120. Now if I was to sum up the two films and my impressions of the two films over the times I've shot them back to back like this, I personally am finding the Fuji 400H to give me more of the colour palette that I look for in landscapes. The UK is predominantly green, you know, it rains a lot and it's very, very green. And I'm finding the greens in the Fuji, no surprise, are more to my liking, and there is better separation between the greens and the yellows. The Portra tends to go a bit too yellow for my liking, and also the Fuji surprisingly was strong with the dead bracken, you know, those sort of those reddish colours. It was very, very clear what they were. I didn't have to work on them at all. Now I have to caveat all of this by saying your scanning technique will have a huge impact on this. I used an Epson V700 for these tests. I set the white and black points to the ends of the histogram and I let it do its job. Any tweaking in the images was applied to both images, so I didn't mess about with colour balance or anything there. But if you're using a DSLR or you're using a different scanner or you get it drum scanned, the colours will be different. So you may find that Portra 400, for example, has better greens and better reds. Your mileage may vary. Everyone does things differently. I'm just saying for my personal uses and from what I've seen, and it is consistent across all the shots, I like the 400H slightly more. And it's interesting actually, it did have a slightly more film speed for me in the shadows. It's a bit more open and those shadows are nicer, and the colours in the shadows particularly were much truer. Again, look at the green on that tree trunk shot. It was very accurate to my eye, whereas the Portra was a little bit off. So there you have it. Will I be shooting 400H? Possibly yes, in landscape. Other shooting, like urban shooting, no. I love Portra 400. I think Portra 400 is better for people as well. So I'm not looking to change over there at all, but I will consider 400H, which means I'll probably discontinue it now because that's normally what happens when you find a film you like. So I hope you enjoyed that very brief comparison, and I hope I'll get out and shoot some more with these films this year. But on that note, I'll leave you till next time. So thank you very much for watching again, and see you soon.